apply these concepts into our daily life. And many of you may have heard of John Harris or Mary Croft in Canada, and they've been looking into these subjects and exploring them to a very high degree. So today we're going to be exploring many of these Freeman concepts tonight. First of all, we've got Litmus, A. Freeman. That's his technical name now, I understand. Yeah. And he's going to be doing 2 talks, 90 minutes each tonight. And we're going to have Simon Goldberg, also known as White Rabbit, is going to be looking into the more Freeman concepts relating to the court system. Then after that, we're going to have a forum where they're going to be joined by Nolan, Simon Penton, Ben Lowry. And so we're going to have a lot more people turning up to sort of ask their questions and discuss this. And much of this is going to go out over the internet overnight on the Goodest Planet Earth website. So we're going to be sort of getting this information out there where it should be. So welcome to the evening of this subject tonight, and I'll hand you over to Litmus. So please give him a warm welcome.
Cheers, everyone. Good to see you again. We're gonna try and rattle through as much of this as we can in the sort of 3 hours we've got. Basically, I'm going to take you through my Project Freeman. Phase 1, which was testing out the whole Freeman sort of hypothesis. Did it check out? Phase 2, a bit of a strategy about how I was going to go about implementing it and testing it out to make sure it was really true. And then phase 3, really getting stuck into implementation. So like sending lots of notices to people and giving them a heads up on what you're doing and why. Mainly so that we all stop paying tax for war. No tax for war, okay? So I'm going to be playing you some songs as well, including that one. So stick around if you like some tunes as well as lots of slides. It's not just all slides. And we got a few film clips as well. So like the one we just had. I start off with that Matrix clip because I think it just summarizes the whole thing pretty well about the kind of matrix that we're living in, and the way that the law is sort of wrapped around all that to confuse us, and so that we haven't got a clue what's going on. It's kind of like being in the matrix. If you take the blue pill, the Collins English Dictionary, you can stay as you are and carry on believing that English is English and that's all it is. If you get into the red pill, the Black's Law Dictionary, you start looking at a thing called legalese and what that really means, and find out that some of the words don't really mean what you thought they did. So we're going to be looking at a lot of that. So bear with me. Don't worry if you can't read everything that's up there, because there's a lot of information. But it's everything I'm going to show you tonight is all on my website. So if you can't read it all tonight, there's if you go to projectfreeman.com. Get a beer, cup of tea, whatever, you can just go through it nice and slowly after. So anyway, we're going to rattle through it. If you got any questions, maybe just hang on a minute and see if I answer it in the next sort of couple of slides. And if not, we've always got the forum at the end, and we can have a bit of chat at the end of each talk. So we got 2 1.5 hour chunks, so I better crack on with it. So just a bit of background. Basically, I got into this whole Freeman thing because I got fed up really of going on protest marches and demonstrations, like the one in London in 2003 against the Iraq War. And basically, millions of people out on the streets saying we're not happy with this, and basically the government just ignoring it and carrying on doing what they liked anyway. So, you start to get a bit frustrated, and we've tried putting on peace festivals and all sorts of things in Ipswich, which went quite well for a few years. This was all up in Suffolk. But then I came across the Freeman on a land process, and I thought, that may be something, if it's true, it may be something that I can use to protest peacefully against the government and show what I really think. So what I did, I used to be a project manager in the energy industry. I did 24 years in the energy industry, so I'm a bit of a gamekeeper turned poacher, kind of, if you like, a little bit. And I used to be a project manager, so I thought, well, what I would have done if I was still in work, thank God I'm not, but if I was, I would have set up a project to check it all out. So that's what I did. And some of these slides, they're for also for kind of corporate type audiences, people who wear suits to work and stuff. So That's how I've tried to move it, so that some of them guys can see what's going on as well. But so what I did was set up the project, projectfreeman.com, which is a dogma-free zone. So it's all about spirituality, community, equality, peace and understanding, and freedom, and taking responsibility, for your own actions. So that was just a little philosophy behind the project, if you like. But being an ex-corporate project manager, of course, I had to have an outline project plan with phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Phase 1 was November 08 through to Feb 09, where I was just basically looking at the whole concept of this free men on the land thing, and testing it out with research. So we're going to run through some of that in a sec, and then we went into phase 2 and phase 3, as I said earlier. So I want to run you through some of phase 1. I won't have time to take you through everything, but we'll do as much as we can. So first I want to mention research resources. I mean, if any of you have looked at any of this theory at all, you find a lot of stuff on the internet that is word of mouth and hearsay and passed on and misquoted and stuff. So what I did was I went into this old bookshop in Felixstowe, where I was living at the time. I went down in the basement and found some old law books from 1927. Because what the powers that be tend to do, I found, was when they reprint a book, they kind of change it and leave out some of the old information. So I found these old law books in this basement in Felixstowe, and and it didn't cost much money, but it was really good, useful material. So apart from a Collins English dictionary and a Black's Law dictionary, I also found this book called Jurisprudence, which covers the principles of English law, often quoted in Black's Law dictionary, and also a book called Indamer's Common Law, which is all about contracts, which are very important in this theory as well. So try to go back to basics, if you like, and look for the source material. But if you're not, just a quick show of hands, how many people have got a rough idea what the Freeman thing is all about? Great, okay. So with that in mind, I think it's best if we rattle through the first bit, if you're kind of familiar with that, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty about what I did with it, if you like. So I'm going to whiz through these, but we're natural beings born free on the land. We have a constitution that protects us. Our person is a legal fiction created when we're registered at birth. And our capitalized name's evidence of that. Our country is a corporation, like all the others. It uses civil law to control and tax us, which is based on Roman law, which is a legal system rather than the law of the land. And although many of us believe we're free, we're really treated more like slaves in a way. But there is a remedy. So if we understand what's going on, we can use it, to our own advantage, if you like. So that's the concept I came across, and basically did a lot of research to check it out. So these are the areas I researched, all of those listed there. But I just want to dip in, as most of you are familiar with the concepts, so I'll probably just dip into a few slides as we go through and pick out a few of the main points. So you probably know about the definitions of freedom and slavery, so I'll skip over that one. But hopefully you're all aware of the fact that there's a language called legalese. So if you look in the English dictionary, you'll find there's a language called legalese, which it says is the conventional language in which legal documents are written. So of course you need a legalese dictionary to understand it, and that's what we've got one here today. You can also tell, because it's a different language, because legalese has words which are common to English, but they don't have the same meaning. And there are then words in legalese which aren't in the English language at all, because they come from Latin or Old French. Things like a stopple and a lodial and things like that. So, but day one researching that was quite a surprise, to find that there was actually a language and it had its own dictionary and words and everything. I looked at common versus civil law. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the difference between common law being derived from judicial decisions and case law, and it's the original law of the land in this country, versus, I mean, it says it's distinct from civil law, whereas civil law it comes from the Roman Empire, and is actually defined, one of the definitions is Roman law. So civil law is Roman law, and it's imposed by the state, and it needs your consent to be bound by it. And it's nothing to do with criminal law or administrative law, so all different types of law. The areas in blue there are civil law jurisdictions, and the browny coloured ones are common law jurisdictions, like this country. So one of the things the Romans left with us was this civil law system based on acts and statutes. And don't forget, a statute is a law made by a government expressed in a formal document, but also a permanent rule made by a company or institution. So something like the co-op, for example, would have statutes as well. I also looked at what is a person, and if you're familiar with this concept that there are natural persons and legal persons, and legal persons are persons in law but not in fact. I wanted to look into the root of that, so I did go back to this original jurisprudence book, and there's a whole chapter in this book on the legal person, and these are some of the things it says. A legal person is any subject matter to which the law attributes a merely legal or fictitious personality, and even brags about it, saying that this is one of the most noteworthy feats of the legal imagination. And that legal persons, being the arbitrary creation of the law, may be as many kinds as the law pleases. So there you go. So if you look in a law dictionary, you'll find there's about 18 definitions of person. The definition of natural person says human being, but if you try to look up human being in the law dictionary, it's not in there. So human beings don't exist under that system. Whereas if you look up human being in English, you'll find a definition. So a person is a legal person, which is a fiction, and is also a corporation. So for example, our beloved monarch basically has the state behind her as a corporation, but has legal a legal person in the name of the crown. So the crown is a legal entity, a corporation soul. And I just want to read you a couple of bits about that, because they're very important for later on. This chapter in this book talks about the sovereign person, and it says things like everything which is public, in fact, is conceived as royal by the law. So when you watch the news and you hear talking about public roads, public buildings, they're the Crown's buildings. They're not ours. We pay for them, but they're owned by them, by this corporate entity, the corporation soul. But the good news is that, of course, public debt isn't our debt; it's Her Majesty's debt. So don't worry, you don't have to pay it off. Okay, I'll show you how later. So what we have is a natural person, if you like, Elizabeth, in an office, occupying the office of the Crown, which is a legal person, a corporation soul. And if you like, she's like the owner and chief executive of the company, which is a thing called a state, which is a constitutional monarchy, but it's a company basically called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And it owns public assets and it has public liabilities. And of course, it's not your government, it's Her Majesty's government. So that's quite clear. So we have a singular person, which in English in plural is people, but you won't find the legal document anywhere referring to people. They'll always refer to the plural being persons, and this is why, because they're talking about bodies corporate. And if you read an actual act, you'll see that quite clearly. I've just got a little clip about this actually, which I'm going to play from the Shawshank Redemption. Okay.
The next morning, right about the time Raquel was spilling her little secret, a man nobody ever on before strolled into the Maine National Bank. Until that moment, he didn't exist, except on paper.
May I help him?
He had all the proper ID, driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, and the signature was a spot-on match.
I must say, I'm sorry to be losing your business. I hope you'll enjoy living abroad.
Thank you. I'm sure I will.
Here's your cashier's check, sir. Would there be anything else?
Please, would you add this to your outgoing mail?
I'd be happy to.
Good day, sir.
Mr. Stevens visited nearly a dozen banks in the Portland area that morning. All told, he blew town with better than $370,000 of Warden Norton's money.
All right, I played that because if you've seen that film, and it's a very popular film, one of my favourites, what Andy Dufresne does to get out of prison basically is he creates a person through sending the right paperwork to the right organisations. So he creates a legal fiction and he gives it a name, but of course he makes up a signature, and at the point he walks into the bank to take the money out, he signs the paper and creates joinder between him as a human and this legal entity that he's created, and starts to represent it by withdrawing the money. So if you watch that film, there's a lot of analogies and metaphors about sort of Freeman ideology in it. There's Shawshank Redemption, yeah, and like I say, all this is on the website as well, so the clips are on there as well, so you can have a look. The person is created via the process of registration, and as you're all familiar with the concept, I'll just remind you that registration comes from the root term registrum, which is from regis, and means king. So when you register something, you're actually signing over ownership of it to the crown. So I won't run through all these definitions, but basically the three big ones that we do without really realizing that we don't have to is register of the birth, which creates the person, registering your address by signing up to vote, which creates the residence, which is the business premises of your registered person, and of course your private conveyance, which creates the vehicle. And if you read the acts that this covers these three areas, you'll see that you don't actually have to do any of this if you don't want to, and we'll look at that later. So what you end up with is a titled name in capitals, which is your person, your company name, which then has a company car, so it has to pay tax on it, and the person, the company resides at a business premises called a residence, and then is bound to pay business rates, council tax. If you actually look at your name, you'll find that your name, as written on legal documents and other things like bills, is actually a legal name because it's the name of your legal fiction. So it's a company name. And you'll also have a title when you join society, and title in legalese is all to do with ownership. So your title is created when you're registered, and it changes at various points throughout your life, if you like, representing this legal entity. But a title is also an instrument, such as a deed, that constitutes evidence of ownership. So this is why when you have a birth certificate, it's actually a type of deed. So it's proof for the ownership of the body, of the legal entity by the state when it's registered. And this is why you need, if you change your name, your legal name, you need to do it by deed poll, because you have to change this deed to show the change in ownership. And then of course we got all the thing about capitalization, writing your name in capitals. And one of the definitions of that is to be converted into capital stock. So you become company stock, if you like. And in legalese, it makes that quite clear. Capital is money or assets invested or available for investment in a business. So, as I say, I won't dwell too long on all of these, but this is quite a good one. We've seen that deeds, titles of ownership of assets, and when your name's capitalized, you become an asset of the company. Well, if you look at the definitions of assets, there are various types, but you'll find there's a nominal asset, which is an asset whose value is difficult to assess. So that's a child, because you don't know what they're going to do yet. There's a capital asset, which is a long-term asset used in the operation of a business to produce goods or services. So that's an adult. When you become legal age, you become capitalized, you become a capital asset. There's a thing called a wasting asset, which is an asset exhausted through use or the loss of value. So I've called that a pensioner. You know, I'm just looking at how the system might consider these things. And then you've got a frozen asset, which is an asset that's difficult to convert into cash because of court order or the process. Well, that's when you're dead, but before your death's been registered. And then once your death's been registered, you become a dead asset, a worthless asset that has no realizable value. And this is, from what I found from my research, is this is how the system treats registered persons, basically. I just want to say a little bit about states and societies. Because if you look at the term society in English, you get one definition. And in legalese, there's two definitions. So if you look at that second box there, with the Black's Law Dictionary, a community of people as of a state, nation, or locality with common cultures, traditions. So that's what we might think of typically as our society. But a society is also an association or company of persons united by mutual consent and to act for a common purpose. So, you know, when you see the term society, you need to be clear which one they're talking about. And if they don't define it, it could be either. So you always need to clarify what they mean by the terms they're using. Also did a lot of research into countries as corporations, and you'll find most countries registered on the Securities and Exchange Commission in New York, which was a federal agency set up to regulate the issuance of trading of securities. Okay, so if we look at definitions, security, it actually says in this law book, is a person who is bound by some type of guarantee. So they're, and if you look at the definition of surety, it says a person who is primarily liable for the payment of another's debt or the performance of another's obligation. And what you find is that your registered person is actually surety against crown debt, which is traded around the world, so that the people who buy it get the interest that's paid through your taxes. So you work, you pay tax, the tax pays the interest on the debt, and that goes to whoever holds the debt. So your person is surety against that debt. You can go on the SEC website and find things like this, Canada. So you'll find a company called Canada with a business address, and it has an annual report, and it'll tell you the sort of number of registered persons it's got and what its national debt is, if any, and all the demographics of that territory. But reporting as a corporation. You can also find the Commonwealth of Australia doing the same thing, publishing prospectus for selling its debt to foreign investors. And I also then found, I looked for UK and Great Britain, but I found, when I put in Her Majesty, I found a few companies. So there's Her Majesty the Queen in Right of Alberta in Canada, Her Majesty the Queen in Right of New Zealand. So New Zealand is this corporate entity owned by the Crown. And you'll also see there Her Majesty's government. So what we think of as our government is actually a company registered on this on the Securities and Exchange Commission website, so they can trade debt. So there you go. You'll see there Her Majesty's government with a business address, a law firm representing them, and Her Majesty's Treasury is also a corporation that exists on this stock exchange. And you'll find things on there like the taxpayer ownership of Royal Bank of Scotland and Lloyd's Group under that company. So what we think of as a government department is actually a corporation. But again, as I say, I'm rattling through these really quick because most of you have got a lot of this. So if you do want to look at any more detail, have a look on the website. And of course, the Royal Coat of Arms is also our state company's logo. So Her Majesty's government, don't forget, not ours. This, just want to mention, this territory that Her Majesty owned under this company called the UK, is actually worth about 12 trillion pounds. So 7 trillion of that is assets built on the land, and the rest roughly is land. And it generates another 1.4 trillion of what it calls gross domestic product, but that's like its annual turnover. Okay, so you have to forget kind of country and think company. So the Queen's the chief exec, Prime Minister's the managing director, the cabinet is the board of directors, and so on, and that's how it works. One of the main products of this company is debt on behalf of its investors, the banks. So when I started this project in late 2008, for example, the published public debt, and don't forget public is royal, so it's actually the Crown's debt, which is why I've called it Her Majesty's debt, was 614 billion. By February of 2010, it was officially recognised as 848 billion, and official projections now, plus the cost of the bailouts, if you add to that, the debt is projected to reach over 2 trillion. So you'll see it's like from the time I started this project, it's going to actually sort of treble. And these guys love debt because it keeps everyone working to pay tax, to pay the interest on it. Okay, so and then they can kind of do what they like. So keep an eye on the debt. Very interesting subject. I believe it or not, when you get into it, honestly, I need to get out more. I think I need to get out more. What I did was I had a look at what a typical person is worth to this company, right? So I actually wrote to the Treasury, and it took me a year, but I found out how much tax I paid during my working life and national insurance, and it was at base interest rate to the Treasury that was worth 385 grand. So when people say, oh, you're a freeman, you're not paying road tax and you're using the road, sorry, didn't do that. No, I paid 385 grand in, so I think I got a bit in the bank, you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't feel guilty at all. I think I've more than paid my way, and I just wish I'd put that money in some other kind of investment instead of giving it to the government, because I don't really think they invest very well, you know, myself. No. So, interesting thing to do actually. Everyone knows how much they pay for their mortgage and their bills and food and stuff, but you ask them how much tax have you paid in your life, they haven't got a clue. I didn't. And you ring the tax office and they'll tell you we only keep records for 6 years and stuff like this. Well, if you keep nagging away and send freedom of information requests, you can actually get all your tax records back to when you started work, and it's quite disturbing actually. Yeah, I realised I'd worked for 3.5 years of my life every day purely to pay for military expenditure and interest on debt. 3.5 years. So for 3.5 years I was going in every day to work just to pay interest on debt and military expenditure. And when you look at it like that, you think, you know, what are we doing? It's crazy. I want to mention something at this point about, because we're looking at Her Majesty's territory and assets and things and what they're worth. There's a lot of sort of divide and conquer stuff goes on about immigrants. So I just wanted to mention this slide. This is a report called Replacement Migration, a Solution to Aging Populations, right? And it was written by the United Nations Population Division in the year 2000. And it actually said that by 2025, industrialized European countries needed 159 million immigrants to come into the country to keep the ratio of workers to pensioners going, to keep the whole system going. All right? So don't blame the immigrants, okay? Because they're invited here and they want immigrants. They love immigrants because, you know, after all, we're all immigrants anyway, let's be honest. But the company wants that because they want them to come in and pay tax to keep the whole system going, and then they can put stories in the Daily Mail blaming them for all the problems. So don't fall for it, because all of that stuff is just divide and conquer stuff. And the guys we really ought to be going after is the big wealthy landowners and the people who are controlling all the land and stopping us living freely on it. Okay, so don't blame the immigrants. So expect to see 5.3 million immigrants every year until 2025. You heard it here first. And welcome to them as well, and long may it continue, as far as I'm concerned. I'm an immigrant, by the way, I should mention at this point. I'm from Wales. Who used to be the original British, I'll have you know, before you lot came along. Right, can you see that? I don't know if you can see that, but these are the different types of companies, like the country is. But the one we're really interested in is the middle one, which is a corporation. Because what you find if you research this stuff is that everything is a corporation and everything works on contracts. So gen yourself up on corporations. The thing with corporations is they have stockholders and shareholders who get dividends, but there's an entity I found from my research called a dummy shareholder, who owns stock in name only for the benefit of the true owner, is what it says. Okay? And shareholders get a dividend. But the identity of this true owner is concealed, so you don't actually know who it is. The shareholders get a dividend, and there's a type of dividend called a bond dividend, and it's a dividend in which a shareholder receives a bond instead of money. All right? And then if you look at types of bonds, you still with me? There's a bond called a book entry bond, for which no written certificate is issued to reflect ownership. So you've got a dummy shareholder with a bond paid in a bond dividend with a book entry bond. So you never see any money, right? It's all hidden away. And this is all in the Black's Law Dictionary. So if we skip on, what I tried to do was just summarize that. So basically you got a human being, a natural human being at the bottom there, born, but by the registration of the birth, it's an imaginary world of the legal person, which is a legal fiction, called, Mr. whatever or Mrs. titled, capitalized, and it becomes a member of society, so it's given voting rights, but it's also then has a dummy shareholder account set up called a national insurance account. So that's like your share account, but that bit is inaccessible to you. So you're like the guy there grafting with a hard hat on you, so you're working away and paying your tax, and that's going into the pot. But your dividend is a bond dividend, so it's just entered in a book. It's entered in a ledger on a computer what the value of your account is, but you're never told that. And instead of getting shares like you would in any other society, a dividend money paid out to you, it's just the value is just entered in a book, and you never see that. So you've got these you go from real to imaginary and to inaccessible. And that's kind of, as far as I can see from my research, that's how the thing works. But in theory, you should be able to find out what is in your share account. Okay? And we can talk about that later. Right, so these are just some of these state corporations that they call countries who are trading debt on the London Stock Exchange. There's a big list of them at the bottom, the ones I could find, but I just pulled out a few on flags there, so you can see places like Naples. Interestingly, Australian states like Victoria, they're treated the same as, say, France, So they're all corporations, all trading debt. So what I found was, having looked at the theory and not really kind of believed it, when I went through it all, I put a rough number on it, but it was about 86%. What I'm saying is it checks out. Okay, so if you look at all the stuff you went through and you said this checks out, this doesn't, most of it checks out. And the main thing is the important bits of it, like the legal person checks out, and the registration of birth and all of that. Now what that leads to is registered corporate entities, part of a corporation, making their human representatives into debt slaves. And I'm going to mention quite a lot about the Her Majesty's finances, as I call it, in a little while. But the debt will never be repaid, and we have to work to pay the tax to pay the interest on the debt. And a lot of people say, why don't we just print our own interest-free money? And the last two, certainly presidents who tried to do that in the US was Lincoln and Kennedy, and look what happened to them. So it's one of the reasons it hasn't happened very often, I think. But as you look at all this, you find what we're actually dealing with is organized crime. It's a protection racket. It says to you, be scared of the bogeyman, but don't worry, your government will protect you from the bogeyman, and all you have to do is keep paying the debt off. A bit like the mafia, really. But, organised crime, don't worry, together we will crack it. But the thing is, with all of that, well, that's kind of the depressing bit. This is what we're living with. But there is something you can do about it. That's the good news, which, I call remedy. I just want to play you another little clip at this point from V for Vendetta.
Good evening, London. Allow me first to apologize for this
Emergency channel!
I do, like many of you, appreciate the comforts of the everyday routine, the security of the familiar, the tranquility, repetition.
Bloody hell.
I enjoy them as much as any bloke. But in the spirit of commemoration,
Who's that, Mum?
whereby those important events of the past, usually associated with someone's death or the end of some awful bloody struggle, are celebrated with a nice holiday, I thought we could mark this November the 5th, a day that is sadly no longer remembered, by taking some time out of our daily lives to sit down and have a little chat. There are, of course, those who do not want us to speak.
Let me think, just let me
I
think.
suspect even now, orders are being shouted into telephones, and men with guns will soon be on their way.
It's Chancellor Sutler.
Damn it!
Why? Because while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the means to meaning. Those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there?
You designed it, sir. You wanted it foolproof. You told me every television in London.
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission.
We need cameras.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you, and in your panic you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutler. He promised you order, he promised you peace, and all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent.
Inspector, you're almost through.
Last night, I sought to end that silence. Last night, I destroyed the Old Bailey to remind this country of what it has forgotten. More than 400 years ago, a great citizen wished to embed the 5th of November forever in our memory. His hope was to remind the world that fairness, justice, and freedom are more than words. They are perspectives. So if you've seen nothing, if the crimes of this government remain unknown to you, then I would suggest that you allow the 5th of November to pass unmarked. But if you see what I see, if you feel as I feel, and if you would seek as I seek, then I ask you to stand beside me 1 year from tonight, outside the gates of Parliament, and together we shall give them a 5th of November that shall never, ever be forgotten.
Okay, I put that clip in because it's kind of, we're either already there or it's kind of where we're heading. And But I love the bit about words will always retain their power, the enunciation of truth. And when you start getting into the remedy of the Freeman stuff, you know, what you can do about this system that we're in, a lot of it is about understanding what words really mean, but then using them and writing documents. You know, you don't have to go marching in London, you don't have to leave your house, you don't have to get violent, you don't have to riot. All you got to do is write a few letters with words in them, and you can be free of it all, and it's... So I think that clip's great, and I think I would encourage everyone to, you know, to have a bit of that V in them. What we're really talking about is rebelling, but peacefully and lawfully rebelling. So as I say, no rioting. Don't get angry, because they love that. That plays into the system's hands, if you like. But you know, using the Freeman techniques that we're going to look at, you can actually peacefully and lawfully rebel from the comfort of your own home. So, you know, one way you can do this is become a free man on the land. So let's have a look what that means for those who don't know. It's a human being in a common law jurisdiction, like this country is, who's revoked consent to be represented and thus governed, and therefore is not subject to any bylaws or orders like statutes. So that makes, basically, if you claim the right to your own sovereignty, it sets you free from statutory law. You can also, if you like, have your own fee schedule to charge for being detained unnecessarily for any violation of your sovereignty, and you can use notary public process as witness for all that. But basically it makes the free man exclusively bound only to common law, and if you take it to the ultimate, under common law you would revoke all your licenses, social security cards, birth certificates and passports and everything else to do with being a member of society. So you go back to the living under common law on the land, basically. But for me, what this is all about is what I call individual collectivism, okay? So I'm writing a thesis about this at the moment, actually. Be published next year, I think. Or you can call it collective individualism. You know, what doesn't matter, but really what it is all about, it's not about getting off paying your parking tickets, okay? And it's not about like, how can I get away with not paying tax? It's about taking responsibility for yourself and being accountable for your actions, not having the government to blame. But also acting honourably against towards your fellow men, yeah? And as I say, you can do this without moving from your home, especially if you've got the internet. And I just want to explain at this point why the state loves demonstrations, okay? Maybe you've never thought about this, but why the state loves a demo? Because they can say, it's a free country, you all have the right to protest. I mean, you have to actually apply like 3 weeks in advance if you want to protest. Is it all right if we go and protest? Do you mind? You know, it's like, thank you. Bullshit. If you're going to protest, you don't have to ask anyone. That's a free country. They love a demonstration because you imagine, right, 2 million people or 50,000, whatever, all going up to London or Manchester or whatever to demo, right? So I just jotted down a few things, right, that are involved with that. So if you think about it, you got tax on fuel, you got VAT on food and drink, you got all the police costs, which adds to the debt, you got the transport costs, you got credit card debt from people buying tickets and food and merchandise, you got merchandise production, you got banners, tickets, stickers, paper, you got meetings, you got speeches, you got PA systems, you got stages, you got computers, electricity, MP's time, helicopters flying overhead, rent a mob, and all the repairs to the damage at the end. They love it. They love it. So I'm not saying don't protest, but I've found a more effective way to protest because, yeah, demonstrations actually create more debt and add to the problem. Whereas if you stop paying tax, you know, you're taking away the thing that this system craves, the money and the debt. And I've found it's by far the most effective. So we're going to look at some of that in the remainder of this talk, and then the next talk at 8:30 or whenever it is. The other thing that demos do is they do, whilst we all have a great glowy feeling about hanging out with our mates and, you know, being right on and that's all good, they do also generate a lot of argument and conflict. and you typically might get rent-a-mob sent in, you know, to stir things up, and then they'll have lots of nice state propaganda about all the horrible peace protesters beating each other up and smashing things up in London, you know, and a lot of that, as we know, is instigated by them. So maybe before we go on the next demonstration, think, shall I go or shall I write a few letters? I found writing letters was more effective, personally, but that's, you know, just my view. So, if you want to be a free man, if you look on the internet, there's typically two ways that are promoted as how to do it. Number one is sacrifice the person, where you like deregister everything and like resign if you like, give up your claim, and if you're over 18 you can do that. Number two that's put up is actually claim the person, especially in America, this one. Would you agree, Nolan? It's big popular in the States, that one. Where you actually copyright the name and claim first lien over it, so first title to it, and you would claim your share of your share account that we talked about. But I thought, when I was looking at all this, there's got to be another way, you know, the middle way, which I call settle up and leave. So that's basically like checking out of the hotel, you know. So you like say, how much have I spent in the minibar, you know, in school, and how much were the newspapers and all that, and then settle up your bill and check out, and off you go into the sunset. But you know, to do that, when you need to know basically what you've paid in, how much you've cost, and how much you've paid. Well, when I looked at this, you might remember the 385 grand we talked about earlier. I think I'm pretty much still in credit a lot. So long may the working tax credits continue. Thank you, Her Majesty's government. And so you can do this. You can look at that and decide if you want to check out. If I do check out, if I get as far as, you know, checking out, deregistering the person completely, I'll be looking for a share of at least 580 grand, because that is my share of Her Majesty's assets, the territory called the UK, and the money that I've paid into the system while I was working. So take off a bit off that for school and stuff like that, and I should be pretty flush. So if you want to come see me in the Caribbean, you know, it'd be cool. We'll have a big party and it'll be good. I'll take the guitar, you know, and have a sing-song. Right, so just a summary, and this slide is on page 1 on the website. That's how it works, as far as I can see. Free people, born on the land under common law. There's only two rules under common law. Do all you agree to do, which is the basis of all contract law. And if you break that one, it's called fraud, and it's a criminal offence. And do not encroach on others, and that's criminal law. So if you cause loss or harm to someone, damage to their property, that's a criminal offence as well. And that's it. There's only 2 rules. After that, you can do whatever you want. But then our stupid parents, without realising what they're doing, go. No, it's not their fault really. Of course, they think they have to register your birth, so they register your birth. They're then transferring the security interest in you to the Crown. And forever after, whenever you sign a document, you're creating joinder, so you're agreeing as a human to represent that legal entity. It's an artificial legal person with a legal name in capital letters. You're a titled member of society, so you have a title like Mr. or Mrs. And you're a legal fiction, or this entity is a legal fiction operating in commerce. It's a registered asset of the Crown. It's surety against Crown debt. It's a nominal asset as a child, which is capitalised at legal age, so it becomes of value to the company. It's actually a Crown agent. It has to pay commission to the company, well, that's called tax. And it's a dummy shareholder paid in book entry bond dividends. All under this system called statute law, which is based on Roman merchant contract law. All part of this thing called society, within a thing called a state, which is owned by a company called the Crown, who has laid claim to all the land within that territory. Okay, and I'm going to go into some of that in the next talk. we're going to look at what I call the land scam, and how the land has been controlled since William the Conqueror to restrict its supply for us and make everything more expensive. So that's the end of, and I rattled through it really quickly because I know a lot of you know some of that stuff, but before I move on to the next bit, have you got any quick questions on that? Or don't forget, we got the Freeman Forum tonight as well, so unless there's something like particularly about what I've said, yeah, I'll move on, but anything? Yeah? Yeah, we're going to look at that. Yeah, the pros and the cons, yeah. I mean, it's about personal choice, really. So far, I haven't lost anything, but we can look at that. Yeah. Like, for example, if you deregister your person, the next time you go to renew your passport, you may have a problem. I don't know yet because I haven't done it, but going to hospital is an inalienable natural human right. Yeah, so I've got a whole section on natural human rights, so we can look at that then. Yeah, is that cool?
Yes, you said that your parents register you and I guess legalese dump you as an asset of the crown, but my understanding of contract is that nobody can contract for anyone else. So if your parents signed you over to the crown, it would only exist until you reach the age of majority. Then you would have the, I guess, privy to be able to opt out of that, because nobody can contract for you, even your mother and your father, because you're not the property of your mother and father.
Yeah,
so,
I agree. You can. I think I might have said when you're 18, as far as I can see, you can opt out of that. You can take yourself out of it.
And one other quick question. The folks who are the heads of the corporation called the Crown that runs, I guess, the UK.
Yeah.
Are they British or are they German?
They're a Germanic dynasty which goes back about 900 years. The house that's in power now is the House of Wettin. It's a German dynasty, goes back to 900 AD or CE. But if you can follow the lineage, obviously, right back to the Anglo-Saxons. So yeah, the Normans were Vikings, which were Germanic, although we think they were. Before them, you had the House of Wessex, the Anglo-Saxons, they were all Germanic. And the family that's on the throne today is a Germanic family, so yeah. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter what race they are, because they don't give a shit about race or country or people or anything. All they care about is controlling territory and title and money and the whole thing.
My research, they actually seem to be Scottish, I have to say.
Yeah, well, there's the House of Stuart, of course, which, although the House of Stuart's been on the throne since 1603, the male line that ending with sort of William at the moment is through the House of Wettin. But it is still a Stuart line through the female side. Okay, I'm going to quickly load up the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's just a quick response to your query, really, about the fact that you can and your comment that you can choose to escape at 18.
Yeah.
What happened to me, I remember quite clearly, is at the age of 16, they came in with my national insurance card and they got me to sign it.
Yeah.
So that's the capitalisation of you at 17.
Yeah.
As a youngster, they come in when you don't know what's going on. They take your signature, then you signed yourself over, I think. Oh, no, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Okay. Cool. That's great, because we have got the forum later as well, so any queries you got at all, we can really open it up in the forum later on. But I got so much to get through, so
I just got a quick question about this to pay tax and to not pay tax. What is do you have to literally get rid of your passport and sign everything before you can do that legally? Just was wondering about that. Are we going to that later?
I'm going through it right now.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool. So, moving swiftly on. So basically, I found out about this Freeman thing. I didn't believe it. I checked it all out. It checked out. So then I thought, right, I'm going to give this a go and start writing letters and see what happens, because you don't know. A lot of people say things they've read or heard somewhere. A lot of them never actually tried any of it. So the real proof is in the pudding. So that's what I'm not employed, which is great, so I've got time to do this kind of thing. When you're busy, work, paying the bill and all that, you haven't really got time to look at this stuff. But fortunately I have, so being a full-time musician, So what I did was go into this. Of course, this is going back to my corporate days, you see, strategy development, isn't it? This is for all the guys in suits. But when I was thinking about how I was going to put this into practice, I jotted down a few things which were important, like you stick up on the wall. So, the essence of being a free man is taking responsibility for your actions, being accountable for their outcome, but also acting honourably. I think we looked at that a little bit earlier. And I wanted something that was going to be honourable, but also by giving the state a fair chance to prove that it believes in the system of society it's created, okay? So I'm just going to opt out without giving them a chance to prove they can stick to their own rules and demonstrate through its actions that it abides by its own rules. And because of my sort of campaigning peace activism background, I wanted it to major on that sort of area as well. And I came up with this, right for your rights. And then I was really pissed off because someone had a domain name registered already, the right for your rights. So lost that one. But I called it the 3 tests of lawful rebellion. And by doing this, I wanted to find out the truth, what is the real truth of this thing. Secure justice and uphold rights. And then publish it all so that anyone else can have a look at it and take a shortcut if you like. So if you look at my website, all the documentation and everything is on there, and you can hopefully benefit from what I've done. So what I did, I looked at this thing, 3 tests: test, protest, and contest. So first of all, test it, see if it works, use real life examples, test the law, and then test out some of these Freeman remedies that you might have heard about on the internet. And then if it all checked out, get into protesting, so serving notices, finding out all your freedom of information stuff, and the main one, number 2 on that one, stop paying tax. And then the third part of it is, if you protest in that way and still nothing happens, you can actually contest the whole system by just leaving it and deregistering everything. So that's like the 3 stages I went through. So I want to run you through some of the first bit, the testing. And this was really testing the state's attitude to their own law, this system of law that they've come up with called statute law. And what I decided to do with this was, if any of you know the Make Wars History campaign, a guy called Chris Coverdale. If any of you been on any marches in London or whatever, before when I used to go on marches, you see lots of leaflets, Make Wars History, stop paying tax. So I looked into all of that, and what you find is there's actually a statute law called the International Criminal Court Act 2001, and it covers war crimes. And this is a UK law. It's been given ratification by the Queen, and it basically says under Section 51 that our actions in Afghanistan and before that Iraq are offences under international and domestic statutes, as well as being crimes in common law and international law. Okay. So it says it's an offence against the law of England and Wales for a person to commit genocide, crime against humanity, or a war crime, even if it's outside the United Kingdom. And it defines what genocide is. Genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of that group. So if you go storming into another country without any justification and kill members of that group, that's genocide. Okay. So what I did was have a look at what happened in Iraq. The British called this Operation Telic, and it's what I call genocide in Iraq. So depending what source you look at, I looked at 4 sources for how many people died. The IBC on the left is the Iraq body count, but that's a media-driven figure, which is on the low side. and that they admit that many of the violent deaths weren't counted in that survey. The Associated Press is based on, that's the second one, only 110,000 deaths. For that is the Iraqi government health ministry, which was put there by the UK and the US effectively. So it's, that's a bit biased. The Lancet survey, you may be familiar with the Lancet. It's a medical journal. They estimate something like 650,000 deaths. And then there was a ORB Opinions Research business, which is an independent polling agency, member of the British Polling Council, and they did a thorough survey of the whole of Iraq and said that their best estimate was that 1.2 million. Their average estimate was just over 1 million deaths, plus a lot of people injured as well, and a lot of orphans left behind. 1.5 million people injured. So if you look at the deaths in Iraq as a percentage of their population, it's 3.3%. Okay, so that would be equivalent to someone coming in and wiping out the whole of the northeast of England. Everyone dead. Okay. So in my view, that qualifies as genocide. And I mean, even the official lowest estimate of 87, that's genocide as well. So there we go, genocide in Iraq. Of course, on top of that, you had the military casualties, most of which were Iraqis trained by the security forces. Whereas what we tend to see in the media, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to see any soldiers killed or anything, but what we typically see is the number of soldiers who die. What we don't see is what a small proportion of those are actually US and UK troops, the majority being Iraqi people who've been trained up to be military or police personnel. So another 15,000 dead there. Then I looked at Afghanistan. So you've got another 203,000 deaths and 47,000 wounded out of a population of 28 million. So that's another big chunk. And so basically, if you remember, the justification for this action allegedly was the September 11th Twin Towers disaster, where 2,973 people died. I have my own views on that, but still 3,000 people dead, terrible. But in response, 1.25 million. So I think that's what they call inappropriate response under international law, and it's a Hague issue. It's a war crime issue, and Tony Blair at least should be on trial for it right now. Whichever way you kind of look at the numbers, they're horrendous. And I used to get really emotional doing this. I'd have a job. I think last year when I did this, I had a job to get the words out. But it's bad when we start getting numb to things like that, isn't it? You know what I mean? But if you only got to watch the news and you'll get numb to stuff like that. So I wrote a song about it. And I put the lyrics on a slide for you so you can sing along, or at least read about it. Can you do the buttons, mate? Yeah. When I looked at all this war stuff, I just found that the same thing is repeated all the time through history, You'll see the same thing happened in Northern Ireland, has happened in India and Pakistan, it happened in Israel and Palestine, thank you. Palestine. And I just found it's the same old thing, and the Thais have a phrase. If you go to Thailand, they have this phrase, same but different, because they haven't got a word for similar. So that's what this one's called. Carbon chaos on the streets and TV screens everywhere the empire's been. Deja vu, I'm sure I've seen this all before. Petition lands and civil war. all part of one big plan ever since the fall of man. Space invaders rule the world. Are you tuned in to the way it's always been? Fear and freedom marketed like cans of beans. The trivia distracts you from the scene and the question why. A trail of terror in our wake. Evolution says you learn from your mistakes, but this is no mistake. We're all part of one big plan ever since the fall of man. I read a book called 1984. If you don't read, just look outside your door. They tell us we're the ones that threat, but I am sure aggressor is the name for those who start the fucking war. And holy words from Hollywood promote the beast and terrorize the Middle East. They came from there, now they're on Sky and CNN in Washington and number 10. Trail of terror in our wake. Evolution says you learn from your mistakes, but this is no mistake. And we're all part of one big plan ever since the fall of man. And it's the same, but different. It's the same, but different. Yeah, it's the same, but different. It's the same, but different. Thank you. How's the sound? All right, can you hear all that all right? Yeah, cool. Nice one. So, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing repeated over and over is what I found. And I checked out all the deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan, as I say, which class is classed as genocide. And then if you look at, if you look back at this act again, under part 52 of it, it talks about ancillary conduct. So which is defined as aiding and abetting and providing, such as providing funds, okay? So, you know, if you know that, if your mate says to you, I'm going to go murder John, can you lend me 20 quid to buy some bullets? And you lend him 20 quid and he goes and buys some bullets and murders John, you're complicit in that crime, right? And it's exactly the same. If you pay tax, you're funding the genocide in those illegal wars. So we're actually all, if we pay tax, we're all complicit in the crime. So to stay law-abiding, we have to stop paying tax. And that, of course, conflicts with the other statute that tells you you have to pay tax. So what you do is write a notice to the government saying, how can I do both? And I choose the moral route, and I choose not to pay tax to remain law-abiding. And basically, that is the process. So if you pay tax in England or Wales, you're breaking this law, Part 52 of the ICC Act 2001. So what I wanted to do, are we off for time? We got sort of 5 minutes or so? 20? Great, okay. Even better, sweet. What I wanted to do is, as I say, test this law. So first of all, I looked at reporting it to my local police in Ipswich. Number one. Number two, if that didn't work, report it to the Met Police. So I'm basically reporting the war crimes of the government. to the police, as it says on this Makes History site that I told you about. And then for me, if that didn't work, and I appealed it and I still didn't get anywhere, I would basically write to The Hague, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, and say, you know, I know someone who's broken your law, and see what happens from that. So that's the process I went through. So on the 23rd of March, this was 2009, I rang up Ipswich Police and I reported the crime to them, and they issued me with an event number 264, and I said I was going to lodge some documents as evidence, and they said take those along to the duty inspector. I said, do I need an appointment? They said no, you can just turn up. So on the 3rd of April.
Okay, here we are at Ipswich Police Station. We're now just coming up to 12:30 on Friday the 3rd of April 2009, and we're about to go in and serve these documents under case 264 the 23rd of March. So we'll see you in a minute and let you know how we get on.
So I did that, and I went in about 12 o'clock, and I reported the crime, basically that by setting out to destroy and subsequently kill many thousands of members of the Iraqi national group. As a part of a coalition of states, the accused, the government and others, committed crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, conduct ancillary to such crimes, etc., etc., murder, conspiracy, etc. So that they were the crimes that I reported. These are the laws violated, 9 in all, including the one I've told you about, number 1, section 51 and 2 of the International Criminal Court Act. And then there's loads of others as well, none of which so far have been prosecuted. These were the perpetrators I named. So the Queen, Tony Blair, Jack Straw was then Foreign Secretary, Jeff Hoon, Gordon Brown, John Prescott, Lord Goldsmith, who was the Attorney General, and his successor, Baroness Scotland, Sir John Stirrup, head of the armed forces, all the military, and of course me. I'm the guy with the poster on his head. Because by paying tax, I was guilty as well. So I put that in as well. So I said all taxpayers. So they were the perpetrators. And then...
Here we are. It's now like 25 past 2. So we've just got out of the police station. We've lodged the documents under case 264. And we've got a receipt to that effect, naming the documents and the case they were received under, and then that was taken by the duty inspector.
So I got a receipt. It took 2.5 hours, but I came out with a receipt, and basically, as far as I'm concerned, we've got an official event number raised, a crime reported, and evidence submitted to back that claim up. I also sent a press release out to all the local press about what I was doing, and Heart FM, bless them, actually picked it up and put it on all their news bulletins that morning. So I'll just show you what the sort of things they said.
And online, this is Heart. It's 6:31 with the latest news. Here's Kelly News McCormack.
An Ipswich man's lodging documents with police today which accuse the government of war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. Paul Haley from Pinmill says the conflicts, which have killed more than 300 British troops so far, should never have happened.
The point is, we as taxpayers are all responsible for the war as well, and the 1.2 million people who lost their lives, all the people who are injured. You know, it's our duty as citizens to report that crime and make sure it's investigated.
On FM, digital and online, this is Heart. It's 7 o'clock. And with the latest news for Suffolk, here's Kelly McCormack.
$1 trillion plan to fight the global recession will be put into action today. Gordon Brown and world leaders agreed to bail out the world economy and clean up the banking system at the G20 summit yesterday. As British troops begin their withdrawal from Iraq, one Ipswich man's on a mission for answers as to why the war started in the first place. Paul Haley from Pinmills handing documents to police today which accuse the government of war crimes. He says it's cost too many lives, military and civilian, and cost too much cash.
There's 6 billion people on this planet. There's more of us than there is of the government and the public servants. So there's always other options. You don't have to drop bombs on people.
A public inquiry into the Iraq war is due to be held later this year.
7:30, and with the latest news, here's Kelly McCormack.
$1 trillion will be pulling us out of a global recession. Gordon Brown and other world leaders agreed the plan at the G20 summit yesterday and say it's the beginning of an economic fight back. A Suffolk man's giving a document to police in Ipswich this lunchtime accusing the UK government of war crimes. Paul Haley from Pin Mill feels Britain should never have gone to war with Iraq, and he told Hart it seems the government's got its priorities wrong.
A lot of our tax money is spent on this kind of thing instead of being spent on things we want it spent on. I hear today the G20 want to give the bankers more money, you know, and we've already bailed them out for making the mistake in the first place. So, you know, it's just got to stop.
It's got to stop. So those clips went out on the news that morning, and when I went into the police station to report the crime, the duty inspector was really not a happy bunny. But the point is, we went through the process and we got the documents recorded. Now then, there's this whole process of letters back and forth, right? I don't think we've got time here today to go through all the detail. I'm just going to show you what happened quickly. Basically, I got a reply. So this was the 3rd of April. I got a reply on the I got on the 7th of May where my name was spelt wrong twice, and it was from the DCI saying that he didn't believe it was a matter for Suffolk Constabulary and he would not be recording any allegation of crime. So the point here is, not only is he not going to investigate it, he's not even going to record the fact there was an allegation made. So I wrote him a letter reminding him of his constable's oath, which is this. Of course, the problem with this oath is that the first thing it says is that they serve the Queen. But what it also says is that they'll uphold fundamental human rights accorded equally respect to all people. And it doesn't say in Ipswich or in Suffolk or in the United Kingdom, or it says all people. So I reminded him of his oath and sent it back to him. He replied the next day, because I'd made allegations against him about allowing government ministers to act with impunity. So he had to put the records straight, of course. So, and I'd asked him, you know, if you're not, who should do it? Metropolitan Police? And in this letter he said the decision to refer the matter to the Met Police is entirely a matter for yourself, okay? But then I looked at the Home Office National Crime Recording Protocol. So these are the crimes for police forces reporting crimes. And it says, following the initial report, details of the incident will be transferred to the force identified as being the owning force, and that the person making the report will be advised. So they didn't do that. So that's complaint number 1. So I then I reported it to the Met Police, and I got this envelope back eventually from them saying terrorism on the front. So they don't miss a trick to like scare the shit out of you, do they? But inside was a very nice letter saying that they acknowledged receipt of my letters and that my comments would remain on file, but they didn't intend to pursue the allegations. And the point here was that they said that no crime would be recorded. No crime would be recorded. So again, I looked at the rules, and the National Crime Recording Standards say all reports of incidents, whether from victims, witnesses or third parties, and whether crime related or not, will result in the registration of an incident report by the police. So they're blatantly flouting their own rules, ignoring their own laws completely, and refusing to do anything. So I sent a complaint to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, who of course all work in the force that they're meant to be checking the complaints about. I sent one complaining about Suffolk and one complaining about the Met Police. And they said that they were completely independent of the police service, but however, each police force is responsible for considering complaints and recording your complaint, and our role is to forward your complaint to the relevant police force. So that's all they do. They're like a post office. And then it ends up back at the guys you're accusing in the first place. It's like, sort that out, John. Why don't you sort that out, mate? Get rid of this hippie freak, you know. I got a reply eventually to my complaint against Suffolk, saying that basically this guy said that the guy who told me that the matter, to refer the matter to the Met Police, was my own, up to me, had acted correctly. Whereas, you know, what he should have actually done is actually transfer that complaint to the Met Police himself. So that completely failed, that appeal. I got fed up at this point and I sent a crime report to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. So that went off on the 12th of November. And I got a reply back with a number. So it basically acknowledged receipt, issued a reference number, and stated that they would give consideration to it as appropriate under the provisions of the Rome Statute. So basically they said they'd look into it, but they didn't tell me how long it would take. And when they said they would write to me when they came to a decision. Still waiting, boys. No letters yet. I then had the outcome of the. I mean, I tell you, this is really cutting a long story short, because this went on for over a year. All this, okay. But I had a letter back from the Met Police about my complaint against them, and they said that they'd failed to record crime because there was no separate domestic offences under the International Criminal Court Act. So it's saying there's no offences domestically under that act, whereas the whole of Section 5 is headed domestic offences. The whole section, you can download it and read it. That's what its title is. So then I sent an appeal against the outcome of the complaint. But what they did, they were crafty buggers, they sent a response to me on email before Christmas, saying that if I wanted to appeal, I had to fill in the attached form and send it back in 28 days, but it was on email, there's no attached form. So I chased them up and said, send me a hard copy. They sent me the hard copy after Christmas, and I said, right, I want 28 days. They said, no, the 28 days started when you got the email. So I quickly rattled off an appeal, filled the form in, posted it, recorded delivery, and it didn't get delivered. Amazing, that, isn't it? I paid £1.25 or something for recorded delivery, and lo and behold, it didn't get recorded. So then I was getting fed up at this point, to be honest. I thought I'm obsessive, you know. I'm going to bloody prove these buggers wrong. But basically, I rang them up at that point and said, look, I need 28 days to appeal, and they said, you know, you can't because we haven't received it. So basically, I thought, well, you've had your chance. I've given you all a good crack at it. You know, none of you have done anything about it. So I'm going to stop paying tax, basically. So my conclusions of all that was that our beloved state doesn't abide by its own legal system. It sets a really bad example of do what I do, not what I say, or it's the other way around, you know what I mean? Do what I say, don't do as I do. We cannot comply. The point is, we cannot comply with the International Criminal Court statute if we pay tax, because we're aiding and abetting war crime. So we're perfectly entitled, lawfully, to stop paying tax. This is the point. To abide by that statute, we have to stop paying tax, which may be used for war. Okay? And a little bit later, I'm going to tell you how I did that. Now, the next thing I did, how are we doing for time, guys? Okay, and then the rest will be in the next one. But quickly to mention, having tested the law and found that the state didn't abide by it, I wanted to test some of these Freeman ideas you might have seen about on the internet. So we won't have time to do all these in this part, but there's another hour and a half after the next session. So please come back to hear the conclusion and some more tunes. But what I looked at was penalty charge notices, so what we know as parking tickets. A thing called This Is Not Me, which you can write on people chasing you for debt. And I wanted to test discharging credit card debt as well. So I want to run through all of those, and I'm going to talk till he tells me to stop, all right? And then the rest will be in the next one, next bit. So, parking tickets. How many people know about this stuff, parking ticket stuff? A few? So, I'll run through it then for everyone else, right? Okay. A penalty charge notice, if you do the research, you'll find it's an offer to contract. So an offer is an act or instance of presenting something for acceptance. Okay? So you don't have to accept the offer. You can honorably accept it conditionally via a counter offer and send it back. So it's like someone making you let's do a deal, and you say, well, yeah, okay, but I'll do a deal based on this, and this, and send it back. And then they might say, okay, well, I'll do a deal as long as we can take that. You know what I'm saying. So it's a negotiation. I've found it's also something called a requirements contract. And if you look in the Black's Law Dictionary, this is defined as a contract between a buyer and a seller, where the buyer needs the goods and services and promises to obtain them exclusively from the seller. Okay, and the seller is promising to supply the goods and services for a specific period at a set price. Okay, that's what a requirements contract is. So the quantity term is measured by the buyer's requirements, right? So I believe that these are these type of contracts, and that's why if you look at a parking ticket, it says you are required on it to do such and such and such and such, right? So if you look at one like this one, you'll find it makes you an offer of terms. Okay, so it's offering you goods and services. Basically, it's offering to sell you this penalty charge notice for like 40 quid or whatever, right? And it says you are required. It has a set price, so you pay a penalty of, it says here, £60, right? For a specific period within 28 days of the date or issue, and it's got a special offer. A discounted amount of £30 will be accepted as final settlement if you pay within the notice period. Okay, so they're making you an offer to do a deal. Now, if you go back to your constitution stuff, this is all on the website, and I didn't have, ooh, what's going on there with the crazy, the aliens are coming. Don't know what happened with the text at the bottom there, but something to do with copying files, I guess. But yeah, look, if you look on the website and the TPUC website and that, there's loads of stuff about our constitution. But for example, if you look in the old Magna Carta, the 1215 Magna Carta, it talks about fines. All fines made unjustly with us, that's the Crown, against the law of the land, and all amercements imposed unjustly will be entirely remitted. So these types of things that they're trying to fine you for are unlawful under the Constitution anyway. So what you can do is, a freeman can discharge claims like that by sending basically a notice of discharge of the outstanding fixed penalty charge by asking for a request of the clarification of the terms, okay? So if you want the detail on this, it's all on the website, and there's some templates, examples, like 5 or 6 examples of letters that a freeman has written to do this, okay? So we don't need to go through all the details now, but basically what you're doing is offering conditional agreement based on them proving their claim against you under this contract. And you offer them a time limit. So you say, I'll give, this is my understanding. If you can clarify all these points I've raised within my notice period, that's cool, I'll pay, we'll do a deal. But if you don't, I'll assume you agree with all my understandings, and we'll say the matter's finished. So you're basically sending a notice back. And the proof of claim that you're asking for is proof that a freeman is a person, and define its meaning, it's a legal fiction as we saw earlier. That you are the legal fiction, and that the thing they're writing to you about is the result of a lawful investigation without prejudice, that they can prove you're a member of a society, and they can name it and tell you which laws apply to it. Which statute laws apply to a human being? None of them, is the point. And that there was some ID shown by you at the time you got this ticket to prove that you were even there in the first place. But if they can do all those, you'll do a deal with them. But they have to reply within a notice period. And the bit I put in, extra to that, is I asked him to write back to me, the human. And I say that if you write to the legal fiction, it will either be returned to sender or ignored. So it's nice to get a letter from a council or something with your, litmus of the family, whatever, Freeman, on it. And I've had those. So they will do it. So I did this. I did this on the first ticket that we had at the time. And we haven't got time to go through all this, but basically it's what I call notice tennis. So they sent me a notice, I sent them a notice back, they sent me another notice, I sent them a notice back, and then they sent me another notice, and it went on until I got a stopple in May. So that went from January to May. And there's a good reason why they were so persistent, and I will explain that later, but it's all to do with the fact that this was from a borough council, okay? So we're going to look later at what actually a borough council is. Right. So, on that point, I'm going to stop there. Later on, we're going to look at the rest of these, and then we're going to look at all the rest of the project. All the discharging credit card debt, all of that stuff. And all the way I'm protesting now, how to serve notice on Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, how to deregister your vehicle with a DVLA, which I've done twice, and how to deregister for council tax and all the others. So, if you found it interesting, please come back for the next session, and we'll have some more tunes and some more Freeman chat. All right, see you later. What I did with it, if you like. So I'm going to whiz through these, but we're natural beings born free on the land. We have a constitution that protects us. Our person is a legal fiction created when we registered at birth. And our capitalized name's evidence of that. Our country is a corporation, like all the others. It uses civil law to control and tax us, which is based on Roman law, which is a legal system rather than the law of the land. And although many of us believe we're free, we're really treated more like slaves in a way. But there is a remedy. So if we understand what's going on, we can use it, to our own advantage, if you like. So that's the concept I came across, and basically did a lot of research to check it out. So these are the areas I researched, all of those listed there. But I just want to dip in, as most of you are familiar with the concepts, so I'll probably just dip into a few slides as we go through and pick out a few of the main points. So you probably know about the definitions of freedom and slavery, so I'll skip over that one. But hopefully you're all aware of the fact that there's a language called legalese. So if you look in the English dictionary, you'll find there's a language called legalese, which it says is the conventional language in which legal documents are written. So of course you need a legalese dictionary to understand it, and that's what we've got one here today. You can also tell because it's a different language, because legalese has words which are common to English, but they don't have the same meaning. And there are then words in legalese which aren't in the English language at all, because they come from Latin or Old French. Things like a stopple and a lodial and things like that. So, but day one researching that was quite a surprise, to find that there was actually a language and it had its own dictionary and words and everything. I looked at common versus civil law, so I'm sure you're all familiar with the difference between common law being derived from judicial decisions and case law, and it's the original law of the land in this country, versus, it says it's distinct from civil law, whereas civil law is
apply these concepts into our daily life. And many of you may have heard of John Harris or Mary Croft in Canada, and they've been looking into these subjects and exploring them to a very high degree. So today we're going to be exploring many of these Freeman concepts tonight. First of all, we've got Litmus, a Freeman. So that's his technical name now, I understand. Yeah. and he's going to be doing 2 talks, 90 minutes each tonight, and we're going to have Simon Goldberg, also known as White Rabbit, is going to be looking into the more Freeman concepts relating to the court system. Then after that, we're going to have a forum where they're going to be joined by Nolan, Simon Penton, Ben Lowry, and so we're going to have a lot more people turning up to sort of ask their questions and discuss this. And much of this is going to go out over the internet overnight on the Goodest Planet Earth website. So we're going to be sort of getting this information out there where it should be. So welcome to the evening of this subject tonight, and I'll hand you over to Litmus. So please give him a warm welcome.
Cheers, everyone. Good to see you again. We're gonna try and rattle through as much of this as we can in the sort of 3 hours we've got. Basically, I'm going to take you through my project, Project Freeman. Phase 1, which was testing out the whole Freeman sort of hypothesis. Did it check out? Phase 2, a bit of a strategy about how I was going to go about implementing it and testing it out to make sure it was really true. And then phase 3, really getting stuck into implementation. So like sending lots of notices to people and giving them a heads up on what you're doing and why. Mainly so that we all stop paying tax for war. No tax for war, okay? So I'm going to be playing you some songs as well, including that one. So stick around if you like some tunes as well as lots of slides. It's not just all slides. And we got a few film clips as well. So like the one we just had. I start off with that Matrix clip because I think it just summarizes the whole thing pretty well about the kind of matrix that we're living in, and the way that the law is sort of wrapped around all that to confuse us, and so that we haven't got a clue what's going on. It's kind of like being in the matrix. If you take the blue pill, the Collins English Dictionary, you can stay as you are and carry on believing that English is English and that's all it is. If you get into the red pill, the Black's Law Dictionary, you start looking at a thing called legalese and what that really means, and find out that some of the words don't really mean what you thought they did. So we're going to be looking at a lot of that. So bear with me. Don't worry if you can't read everything that's up there, because there's a lot of information. But it's everything I'm going to show you tonight is all on my website. So if you can't read it all tonight, there's if you go to projectfreeman.com. Get a beer, cup of tea, whatever, you can just go through it nice and slowly after. So anyway, we're going to rattle through it. If you got any questions, maybe just hang on a minute and see if I answer it in the next sort of couple of slides. And if not, we've always got the forum at the end, and we can have a bit of chat at the end of each talk. So we got 2 1.5 hour chunks, so I better crack on with it. So just a bit of background. Basically, I got into this whole Freeman thing because I got fed up really of going on protest marches and demonstrations like the one in London in 2003 against the Iraq War, and basically millions of people out on the streets saying we're not happy with this, and basically the government just ignoring it and carrying on doing what they liked anyway. So you start to get a bit frustrated, and we've tried putting on peace festivals and all sorts of things in Ipswich, which went quite well for a few years. This was all up in Suffolk. But then I came across the Freeman on a land process, and I thought, that may be something, if it's true, it may be something that I can use to protest peacefully against the government and show what I really think. So what I did, I used to be a project manager in the energy industry. I did 24 years in the energy industry, so I'm a bit of a gamekeeper turned poacher, kind of, if you like, a little bit. And I used to be a project manager, so I thought, well, what I would have done if I was still in work, thank God I'm not, but if I was, I would have set up a project to check it all out. So that's what I did. And some of these slides, they're for also for kind of corporate type audiences, people who wear suits to work and stuff. So that's how I've tried to do it, so that some of them guys can see what's going on as well. But so what I did was set up the project, projectfreeman.com, which is a dogma-free zone. So it's all about spirituality, community, equality, peace and understanding, and freedom, and taking responsibility, for your own actions. So that was just a little philosophy behind the project, if you like. But you know, being an ex-corporate project manager, of course, I had to have an outline project plan with phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Phase 1 was November 08 through to Feb 09, where I was just basically looking at the whole concept of this Freeman on the land thing and testing it out with research. So we're going to run through some of that in a sec. And then we went into phase 2 and phase 3, as I said earlier. So I want to run you through some of phase 1. I won't have time to take you through everything, but we'll do as much as we can. So first I want to mention research resources. I mean, if any of you have looked at any of this theory at all, you find a lot of stuff on the internet that, you know, is word of mouth and hearsay and passed on and misquoted and stuff. So what I did was I went into this old bookshop in Felixstowe, where I was living at the time. I went down in the basement and found some old law books from 1927. Because what the powers that be tend to do, I found, was, you know, when they reprint a book, they kind of change it and leave out some of the old information. So I found these old law books in this basement in Felixstowe, and you know, and it didn't cost much money, but it was really good, useful material. So apart from a Collins English dictionary and a Black's Law dictionary, I also found this book called Jurisprudence, which covers the principles of English law, often quoted in Black's Law dictionary, and also a book called Indamer's Common Law, which is all about contracts, which are very important in this theory as well. So, you know, try to go back to basics, if you like, and look for the source material. But if you're not, just a quick show of hands, how many people have got a rough idea what the Freeman thing is all about? Great, okay. So with that in mind, I think it's best if we rattle through the first bit, if you're kind of familiar with that, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty about this. This comes from the Roman Empire, and is actually defined, one of the definitions is Roman law. So civil law is Roman law, and it's imposed by the state, and it needs your consent to be bound by it. And it's nothing to do with criminal law or administrative law, so all different types of law. The areas in blue there are civil law jurisdictions, and the browny coloured ones are common law jurisdictions, like this country. So one of the things the Romans left with us was this civil law system based on acts and statutes. And don't forget, a statute is a law made by a government expressed in a formal document, but also a permanent rule made by a company or institution. So something like the co-op, for example, would have statutes as well. I also looked at what is a person, and if you're familiar with this concept that there are natural persons and legal persons, and legal persons are persons in law but not in fact, I wanted to look into the root of that. So I did go back to this original jurisprudence book, and there's a whole chapter in this book on the legal person, and these are some of the things it says. A legal person is any subject matter to which the law attributes a merely legal or fictitious personality, and even brags about it, saying that this is one of the most noteworthy feats of the legal imagination. And that legal persons, being the arbitrary creation of the law, may be as many kinds as the law pleases. So there you go. So if you look in a law dictionary, you'll find there's about 18 definitions of person. The definition of natural person says human being, but if you try to look up human being in the law dictionary, it's not in there. So human beings don't exist under that system. Whereas if you look up human being in English, you'll find a definition. So a person is a legal person, which is a fiction, and is also a corporation. So for example, our beloved monarch basically has the state behind her as a corporation, but has legal a legal person in the name of the crown. So the crown is a legal entity, a corporation soul.